Okay, I think we'll make a start. Looks like everybody's through from the lobby. Welcome everybody to today's Curriculum Connect. We have the author of the Emerging Identities Teacher Guide here with us today, Jo Heathcote, and I'm Victoria Healey from the English Subject Support Team. We're delighted to welcome you to today's session. And before we get into the main session, I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping points for today. So just to mention that all of the materials from today's session will be available to you as slides after the session, presentation slides. And within the presentation slides, there are links to things like the schemes of work that we will mention later on as well. Now, because you've booked on the webinar today, they will be available in My AQA afterwards, and they'll be available under the section that says My Bookings. And they will also be available perhaps to other colleagues in your department who have not been able to attend today. They will be available on Centre Services. It does sometimes take a few days for them to appear there on our secure page on Centre Services as well. You might have noticed already from joining today's meeting that today's session is being recorded. And in terms of the content of today's session, we always like to make it clear that we won't be discussing or referring to any future live question papers during today's session. So to give you an overview of the kind of content that we're going to cover today, first of all, we're going to be thinking about the Emerging Identities Teacher Guide, published in collaboration with Collins. We're going to think about what inspired this teacher guide and the rationale. And then we're going to move on to think about how this might work in practice, and then where we can take this next. And finally, it'll come back to me and I'll talk a little bit about some further support that's available through AQA and also some online and on-demand training that we have available too. So I'm hopeful that you have received alongside your booking for today a link to this teacher guide. If not, please can we have a copy of the link just pasted in the chat just in case anybody's not had a chance to have a look at it, and then you've got the link there and ready for later as well. This is where we're going to be our kind of starting point for today's session. It's a free resource and it lives on the AQA public website, so you don't need to go onto Centre Services to access this resource. And that's going to be our starting point, and then we'll branch into wider discussion as well. Okay. So I think it's now time to properly get started. So first of all, hello, Jo. I feel like in my introduction, I didn't introduce you properly there. So thank you again for joining us today. And I think it would be really useful as a starting point to think about when you were kind of in discussions with AQA and thinking about preparing this resource, really spending some time thinking about what inspired emerging identities.
Okay, I'm just going to take control of the slides there, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what we were doing. Certainly, sort of as this project emerged, the brief really was to just give a little bit of inspiration, a little bit more variety for GCSE English Language, to maybe think about it with a different hat on and think about what the possibilities were really within the qualification itself. Not just to think about it as maybe a bit of a sideline for literature. We all know it's quite difficult teaching whole text for literature, and there's always that time pressure in the classroom. But I think part of the brief was to kind of just re-inspire us a little bit really about GCSE English Language as a course in its own right, a definitive course in its own right, and to just think about a refresher at this point in the specification, to just think, well, what's possible? What can we do here? What are the opportunities rather than the problems around GCSE English Language? So kind of put a bit of a positive spin on it, really, that if we've got the opportunity to work with unseen texts on the final exam, then that actually gives us a lot of freedom in terms of planning our courses and curating our courses, and what could we do with that freedom. So really I wanted to think about using some texts here that you haven't found on the exam. How can we use this to engage young people with reading? It's a big debate, isn't it? Always, I think I've been teaching 30 years, Victoria, and I feel we've had the reading for pleasure debate in all of those years. but what would young people like to read? Are there some things here that might re-engage them with reading? So it's serving another purpose as well as just thinking exam. Obviously, sort of in very recent years, since we've had the missing pages report and so on, we've had that need for far many more diverse voices, more experiences in the text that we teach. And where we've got this kind of this unseen exam at the end, then in our teaching materials we have got that freedom of choice, and it's a real opportunity to get that diversity into our courses and to engage young people with what they're reading very directly. So it was about just being a little spark of imagination, I think. We could all do with that sometimes, can't we? And even though it's not a huge resource, we've just got 4 texts in here, then it's really to kind of just give everyone a bit of inspo, really, and fire up our enjoyment of English language, not just for the students but for us as well, there in the classroom, just a little bit of inspiration.
That was certainly one thing I was going to say, Jo, is that when I came across the resource for the first time and was engaging with it, it was that inspiration that I felt through the suggested wider reading as well. It was fantastic. So yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that too.
So, I mean, just sort of zoning in a little bit on the choices that we made. Obviously, it's quite a big ask in 4 texts to kind of cover all that ground. But as you say, these are starting points. So, the first text, for example, comes from this author, Caleb Azuma Nelson, who I discovered a couple of years ago. And it was a recommendation to me. And I think I've mentioned this writer at a couple of conferences, Victoria. I think it's perfect for the age group. Absolutely perfect reading for the age group. You can see I've just put some little taster snippets on the slides here. It's the last day of school. The air vibrates with something large and unknown. And this whole extract is kind of just about those endings. It's about students finishing their A-levels, thinking about all splitting up, going off to university and so on. And it's really sort of, I think it's a great one, even at the minute, it's like prom season, isn't it? And so on. And just that feeling of this time of year, it's captured really beautifully within this novel. So I think it's, if it's not on your holiday reading list, if it's not on your to be read pile for the holidays, I would definitely look up this author. Small Worlds is the extract that this is from, but his other novel, Open Water, is fantastic as well. And it's just really fabulous the way that they organise these novels. It's like a Spotify playlist that comes with them. I mean, it's so fantastic because there's lots of music mentioned in the novel. So I just felt it was a great text to kickstart the resource with, to introduce year 10, year 11 to a new writer, and maybe, to think, well, if they've read this, maybe they'd want to read the rest of the novel as well. It might just give them that inspiration to think, oh, that was pretty good what we did in English today, and maybe I'll go and look for it as well. So then our second text was Abby Dare's Girl with the Louding Voice, and honestly, it's an absolutely wonderful read. You can see, obviously, from the quotation I've chosen on the slide there, that it deals with, a very, very serious topic. But the narrator of this novel is so fabulous. If you've not read it, I mean, I would probably do this as a even as a year 9 text, the whole novel. Do you know what I mean? I just think it's well worth getting in every classroom, just because the narrator Aduni in it. I defy anyone to read this extract and not fall in love with Aduni, because she is such a vibrant character. Again, she's 14, almost 15. She's the age group of many of our students, and yet, she's going through this very, very difficult experience. But she does it with such humour. She's so funny as a narrator. She's absolutely wonderful. And so that was an extract that I really wanted to bring to the fore, and to get people thinking about the possibilities around that. And again, hopefully inspire some more students to pick up that novel. Just as an aside, it was actually one of my own students who introduced me to that novel. So that's really nice kind of bit of feedback there. It was one of my year 10 students who was reading that novel and said, "Miss, have you read this?" So it's a great one, I think, to share with students. I was also asked to include some non-fiction in the pack. And in terms of the non-fiction, I chose Dara McAnulty's Diary of a Young Naturalist. And I chose this particularly because I wanted to include a neurodiverse writer. And where I find this a very inspiring text for young people to work with is the fact that that Dara won a prize for writing this, writing his diary, but he wrote it when he was 16 years old. And I think it's really nice for young people to see that another young person can be a published writer. I think that's really, really important. It's like, here's this amazing boy. He's 16 years old. He's got a neurodiversity, but here he is. He's a published writer. Like, I could be a writer too. I think it's really important that young people see themselves as writers as well as readers. So again, that kind of informed that choice, and it's kind of it's a really beautiful extract. I hope people enjoy it when they read it there, and I hope students enjoy it. And my final choice again was quite a challenging topic. This was from Catriona O'Sullivan's memoir, Poor. It was about growing up really in abject poverty in very, very difficult circumstances. The memoir itself is very, very hard hitting, but I've chosen a particular passage from it where she is at primary school. So it's an experience that all young people could relate to, but it's the fact of how much she loves school because that's her safe place, it's her secure place. So I think in terms of just being able to develop some empathy there, to think about the experiences of what some people's lives may be like. It's a very moving, very poignant extract. So again, I hope that that would be, really helpful in the classroom to unpack some topics. And then obviously, if we're going on to look at particular literature texts later on in our courses, a lot of the themes that emerge here, we might find their roots in some of these texts.
Thank you so much, Jo. And it was interesting there. It was lots of conversation on the chat about, how inspiring, particularly when we came to the last selection with Paul. So it's so lovely to see that, obviously, that is already causing those really positive, or bringing about those really positive conversations about how this might be used in the classroom as well. It'd be really lovely now. So we've got that. What I'll do is, because what was really useful feedback is that it would be helpful to kind of just have those author names and the extracts alongside those slides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repost in a moment the link to the guide in the chat, where you will have some of those extracts in full, and obviously the author's name and the reference as well, which will be great.
Start dipping in.
Right? Absolutely. In the next part of the session, it'd be really interesting to explore. So we've got the kind of rationale and an understanding of what's available to us here in this resource. How might this then work in practice? What might this look like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly, obviously, I was working with HarperCollins to develop this resource, and obviously drawing on their expertise at producing teacher packs, and some of the things, some of the resources that we've made before. This kind of format has been, found to be really useful for teachers. So we've really got very detailed lesson plans. I'm not intending to, teach any grandmas to suck eggs here with the lesson plans, but we do tend to include a lot of detail in the lesson plans when we produce materials with HarperCollins, just really to maximise the potential for them. So these are things that are so detailed that if you've got someone coming in on supply, perhaps in your department, or you have to cover a lesson, there's enough in there so you've got a really, really meaningful English lesson out of it as well. But obviously, hopefully, we've done a bit of the hard work for everybody as well, and a lot of the pre-thinking. We've given alternatives within the lesson plan. You know, you could do it this way or you could do it that way, and so on. So there's plenty of guidance in there, even down to, you know, popping on the resources section there, you know, don't forget to get your mini whiteboards out. That kind of little aid memoir is in there. And obviously, we've tied everything very closely to the assessment objectives for GCSE English Language. The other thing that we've done within the pack is there are then some worksheets that are photocopyable, downloadable, and so on. So all of the worksheets are pre-made. We haven't made PowerPoint slides because obviously lots of schools have their own template and format and so on. And if you wanted to template it up and so on in your own format, that would be absolutely fine. But we've not been prescriptive about that. But the worksheets are there, so you can just whiz those off for students to work with. And what we've tried to do there is certainly in every lesson, I've tried to include some opportunity for some paired work and for some group work. We have lots of debates at the moment about getting more oracy into the English classroom. I personally consider it an absolute essential in the English classroom. And to get students talking, to get students thinking in pairs, in small groups, building their confidence, because we do need to bear in mind that the terminal exam is unseen, that they do need to have that independence of thought at the end. And so if we can build that confidence through the course with them talking, working together, sharing ideas and so on, then hopefully they will feel that little bit more confident when they are working alone in the terminal exam. The other feature that we've tried to include, I'll just move along a little bit here, would be in terms of the writing choices. We have, or I have, hopefully included, I'm speaking of the royal we then, who do I think I am? I have included a number of writing choices within each lesson plan, not just one writing choice, but a number of suggestions. So you could pick whatever was suitable for your class. You could pick a task that, oh, we've not practiced anything like that, let's give that a go. And I have to stipulate here, Victoria, that I've not just included exam type tasks. I've included other types of writing to actually foster the skill of writing. At the end of the day, writing represents, you know, 50% of the marks on the examination. There are particular skills that we need, as we know from the mark scheme, for students to show, but there are lots of different vehicles that we could use in order to do that. So, you know, I've included some personal writing, some memoir, because it stems out of the texts, and narrative and so on, but also some academic writing as well, so it filters back into those high tariff questions, such as we find on paper 1 question 4 and so on. So there are other kind of ways and means to do that. There are also some creative tasks in there, and you know, I feel quite strongly about this. There's, you know, there's quite a movement happening at the moment, sort of within universities and so on, about, you know, is there just the essay? Can we move beyond the essay? And that's something we might even think about as, you know, we move towards, you know, new specifications in the future, whenever that may be. But, you know, is the only way to respond to a text through the essay format? And maybe there are some more creative opportunities. And I feel very passionate about that and about the opportunities for writing. I think it was the National Literacy Trust that has done some very interesting research recently about writers and young people writing. And sort of the headline figures look a bit doomy and a bit gloomy to begin with. But there was a really a sort of a tiny addendum in their research report that over the past 15 years, which I think is a heck of a time, we can't just blame smartphones for that. Over the past 15 years, and I quote, that the number of young writers who are eligible for free school meals, the number of writers on free school meals are more likely to write daily in various formats and with a stronger sense of ownership and other motivating factors than students who are not. And I found that incredibly interesting to consider, who's writing? Who are these students who are writing, and what opportunities can we give them to foster that love of writing on the course? So yeah, do have a little look at that research from the National Literacy Trust. I found it very interesting and actually very heartwarming. So yeah, that's kind of how it might work in practice, in a nutshell, really, that there are all those opportunities to open up in the classroom.
Thank you so much. And that's so lovely, isn't it, that all of those different ideas are there as suggestions within the resource itself. The really focused work, looking at some small bits of extract to build confidence, and then these opportunities to engage with the text in a different way, perhaps through creative responses. It's really lovely. So we've got the resource, and we've perhaps had a go at using them flexibly, perhaps within our existing curriculum or in some of the other ways that you spoke about earlier. And we're interested in taking a broader view now about where we could take this next. Do you have any suggestions or things that you could signpost that might be really a great support to people if they wanted to go further with this?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we've included in the resource, we've included sort of at the end of each extract, it's a bit of a dual purpose one, really. We've included obviously these lovely sections about the authors themselves, a little bit about the text as a whole and the context from which it emerged. And I've really then tried to do a little bit of spade work for colleagues here by suggesting, further reading or other things that if you've actually enjoyed this, why not dip into this, and there are 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5 suggestions. They're ostensibly there for students, I have to say, but I would advise teachers, I would say, please draw attention to them. Please, make those suggestions for students, and maybe there's an opportunity there. I have chosen things that I think will appeal to young adult readers in the link there, and they may even be useful for colleagues if they're looking for companion texts or other texts that they could use as part of a scheme of work. Hopefully it will give you some more interesting text to go on, or to go off and create some more extracts or some more things to work with that stem from this. So that's the idea of the appeal, really, and maybe even to share those with your school library or your librarian to get some of these suggested texts in there that might make a nice display in the library to accompany your work there, for sure. And then just to think a bit further, sort of beyond the lesson plan, sort of at the end of every lesson plan, again, I've tried to just do a little bit more homework for everybody and create these sections which we've called Explore Further. And so even though we've only had space in the resource to have the extract and the lesson plan and so on, it's like, well, okay, what else could we do in our teams? What else could we do in our department? So there are other ideas there as to how you might get a week's worth of work out of just one extract, things that you can link it to, certainly things like where you can find videos, video interviews with the authors themselves, which I think is always lovely to bring it to life and introduce students to the authors themselves, podcasts and so on. So just lots of different things and lots of different texts, but also how you might link it to some of your AQA set texts as well. So, does it link with any of the poetry clusters or so on? Does it link with your Shakespeare text in terms of its themes? Just sort of off the top of my head as I'm trying to recall them, things like the Abbey Dare, which is about child marriage. You know, if you're teaching Romeo and Juliet as well, and you're looking at, you know, Lord Capulet and his views, it can be quite a nice sort of symbiotic relationship between the two. And also, you know, links to charities and things like that that you could use for your non-fiction and to develop work there. So, so really, it's just to kind of, as we said at the start, sort of give a little bit more inspiration for you to take away in your department and just have a bit of fun with it, really, and see what creative opportunities you can come up with. So with that topic in mind, I don't know if you want to maybe say a little bit of something about the schemes of work there, Victoria, or...
Absolutely, and I know thank you again, Jo, for your support in preparing these new refreshed schemes of work. I'm just, because the links are there in the slides themselves, but you've not got access to those now, so I've just popped a link in the chat for you. When the slides are available to you under my bookings on AQA later, and or on Centre Services for colleagues who are not here today, those underlined sections there are hyperlinks that will take you to them directly, but there's now a link in the chat for these as well. And you can see that there's schemes of work here for November entry, for 1 year, perhaps used for use with recent learners, or as part of a 2-year language GCSE English Language course, or indeed a combined GCSE Language and Literature course. And these, I've not got control at the moment, but one of the things that I'll take back control if that's okay, Jo, for a second. But one of the things that's fantastic to share within the schemes of work that I just really, really loved was the wider reading list as well, the suggested reading and the links to those. I feel, Jo, I'm worried I'm going to take over anything you wanted to say here. So shall I let you talk for a minute, and then if there's anything, but yeah, absolutely fantastic. And you've got the link there as well. So I'll let you talk for a moment.
Yeah, and then if I miss anything out, please chip in, or if you think there's anything else that everyone needs to know. So yeah, I mean, obviously, this was quite a big project as well, to kind of look back at the schemes of work and refresh them and think, how could we add some value to them? So thank you very much for asking me to do those. It's a real privilege to be able to do that. To be honest, like, I put a few tried and tested things in there, Victoria, that have worked with my own students. I wanted to break the course down a little bit for everybody to show how you can create this lovely cohesive course with GCSE English Language. I've always enjoyed teaching it. And we've done these kind of little colourful, colour-coded overviews of the papers. And that was kind of a little trick that I used to use with my own students. I used to photocopy those and have them in the front of their books so that there was no confusion about where we were heading, or, you know, the things that you say a million times. So things like that are just there, you know, as little extras for people to use and make use of. I've done quite a bit of thinking about timing and the structure, a possible structure of the course, or a suggested structure of the course. And I do want to say these are suggestions, like there's absolutely nothing prescriptive about this at all. It's just kind of organised in a way to get you started within your department, particularly you know, if you come into this new, maybe we've got some people who are new heads of English. Congratulations, it's the best job in the world. You know, perhaps if you come into it new, or you've just taken on the role of Key Stage 4 coordinator, it might give you some food for thought in terms of how you might plan and organise your course. And please feel free to cherry pick the bits that work for you. And you know, nothing is prescriptive here, but it has been done with a certain sense of logic, and obviously based on my own experiences in the classroom. So I've done these quite detailed teaching phases. Here's what I would suggest for this half term. It could be a movable feast, you could put it anywhere, but I've put kind of a little rationale in there as to why, you know, it might be useful in this place. Obviously based on my own teaching in the classroom. 13 years of my teaching was also in post-16 with resit students, so I've tried to bear in mind all the different permutations as well that you might need. So we've done these quite lengthy suggestions, kind of here's why it's here, here's a suggested timing, and then here are all the things that you might do within your course. And as you can see, there are plenty of ideas in there to get people started, or to refresh what you're doing already. I think these are what you were thinking about
yes,
there,
I got
Victoria.
carried away because this was fantastic. Yeah, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this if you've got chance. That would be great.
So again, it was about putting my thinking cap on really and thinking, okay, what resources are there already on the AQA website? What booklets are there? What anthologies are there, and so on? And they've all been beautifully hyperlinked into the resource. So once you click on it, it will take you directly to the things that have been referenced there. I've also kind of looked at like what's available now, what's out there in terms of, again, interesting fiction, interesting anthologies that you might want to dip into or get some copies of in your department, where to find interesting picture prompts and things like that. So again, as we've said, just doing a little bit of the hard work. We know time is short. And what I've also tried to do are make some links with existing papers that are there on the website. So if you were planning a scheme of work, or you were planning a week of work and you wanted to match it with a past paper at the end of the week or at the end of your teaching unit, then you can see there, there are suggestions. Oh, here's what I might put with the Life of Pi paper, or here's what I might put with the Silk Factory paper, and so on. So other little extracts that you might use, and just really from my own love of reading and, having teenagers and being in the classroom, things that I think would really work there. And also, I wanted to really pin down assessment objectives for colleagues. So I've created some grids within the schemes that are really explicit about, right, this is the assessment objective, here's where it's tested. And then I've done these little sections, which I've called them your fingertip knowledge and your skills checklist. So it's like, here are the things that students definitely need to know. These are the things that they need to know about or how to do. So you can see there just of the example on the slide, and then what's the skill that comes with that. So it's a bit of a knowledge and skills combo there in those, but just again, if you've got colleagues who are just coming to you, ECTs, or colleagues with less experience, this might be a really nice way to help them to conceptualize the course, and to conceptualize what they need to be doing for each question or for each assessment objective, just nice and clear really, and bullet pointed, and just a useful checklist to make sure everybody's got all bases covered across the course. And then finally, sort of in this section, I've just really thought, it really worries me when I see all these headlines. Honestly, I have to avoid reading the newspaper sometimes and avoid the headlines. It's like, oh, A-level English and the decline and blah, blah, blah. But I think it might be really nice to kind of foreground for students the stepping stones into, by doing this at GCSE, this is the stepping stone into A-level English Language, A-level English Literature, the combined course, and so on. And just to show how, you can marry the two and encourage students to think about English A-level. Yeah, we never know. We might have a new Prime Minister soon who's got an English degree, so maybe it's good PR for us. Who knows what that will be? But certainly, there's lots of evidence coming out at the moment about the benefit of that stepping stone into A-level and where it can take you and where English degrees can take you. And I think those of us with a real love for the subject would do anything to keep that momentum going, really. Yeah. Okay, so and just to hand back to you now, Victoria, I think you've got some more suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. And it was lovely to see all of those resources and start think about kind of how that might be taken away and developed in classrooms as well. So thank you very much for that. I've got a very small segment now just to kind of showcase some of the things that are coming up for you in autumn. I've already sent the link to the schemes of work that Jo was just going through in the chat, but I just want to signpost that they live permanently now on our public website, so you don't need to go through centre services to get to these. It's just sort of free to access. This is what the page looks like. It's the dedicated GCSE English Language page, and it has some tabs across the top, and these resources, the Emerging Identities resource, the schemes of work, sit under the Teaching Resources tab. So please do kind of come here and have a little look through what's available and download as needed. What we do also have available on the same, accessed via the same page, there's just a tab at the top that says professional development, is the opportunity to book for free and in different formats, whether that be live or on demand, various courses. So there are some currently running, so you'll see their dates of the 15th of July and the 13th of July, for example, for GCSE English Literature, Mark Scheme Guidance and Application. So this is an opportunity to join with either the lead or the senior examiners, going through some marking activities and looking at how the mark scheme is applied. And then you'll be able to also see some dates that are currently available to book for the autumn term. A bit later on, actually, in November and December, 6 dates currently available for English Language, Paper 1 and Paper 2. And that will be using real exam scripts from this summer series. So it's great to get booked onto those and secure those spots ready for September. Down the side here, there is a longer list of just really kind of showcasing our broader menu of kind of support that we have available, courses such as Stretching 3 to 4, Working Towards Outstanding Grades. Perhaps if you're supporting students in FE or research learners, you might be interested in the feedback on the November series. So please do, if you look, there's a link there, it says the AQA Professional Development page. You'll have that in your slides when they come through. But again, it's just on the public website. It's great to book onto some of those courses, and yeah, hopefully that would be something you'll be able to do as well going forward. If you require any further support, I'm here today representing the English Subject Support Team. So I'm Vicky Healey, Subject Lead for English, and I work as part of a wider team of Subject Support Managers, all with recent and relevant experience teaching or in assessment through AQA as well. We're available to contact through the email addresses that are being shown on screen as well now. So please do reach out to us if we can be of any help at all. And we're also looking for your feedback, please, and as part of our teacher panels. So as kind of mentioned earlier in today's session, we're currently preparing for assessment reform following on from the curriculum and assessment review, and AQA have set up some teacher panels, and there's been a really good level of engagement so far with our English teacher panels, and we'd love for you to get involved. So there is a link in the slides, it says sign up here, but also that QR code on screen will take you directly to that, and it's your way of participating in surveys or even perhaps focus groups, depending on kind of your level of involvement, to feedback to AQA your thoughts as that process is ongoing.